Mr. Shilmo, I think it is,
Yes,
right? Let me ask you, this concern about live fire. Now, I learned to shoot when I was 11 years old, and in Boy Scouts. And the thought that they would have let me pick up a gun and handle the gun without ever firing it is beyond comprehension to me. And, you know, beyond all sorts of things, this is just kind of common sense. If somebody, you know, I'm a prosecutor, I deal with handgun violence all the time, and the fact that somebody can get a permit to go out and carry a gun without ever firing one round, I mean, just sort of beyond me, but especially in light of the statute. It doesn't say, you're right, it's been pointed out, the statute doesn't specifically say they have to fire one shot, but it does require that they do a training that the proper operation, safe handling of a handgun, how to load it and unload it, how to clean it, how to maintain it, how to operate it. Now, frankly, again, it defies reason to me that that somehow doesn't include actually showing that you can pull the trigger. We don't let people drive a car without showing they can actually drive a car, and a handgun is actually far more dangerous. And you know, and folks like the NRA point that out all the time. So it just, I guess it's, how do we do that? But the other question I have about ranges, you said there are no ranges. It's pointed out that actually the NRA has a class which offers free firing in St. Mary's County, I think, in Lexington Park, coming up in a few weeks. I just signed up 2 weeks ago for a Groupon thing through the internet. Well, wonderful. $38, my son and I will get a box of ammunition and go out to a range and get to shoot as much as we want. So isn't that available to folks? You know, isn't that you know, something that people can do? And why do we not want people to know how to shoot a gun if we're going to give them one?
Well, first off, thank you very much for your questions, and I do appreciate your insightful history. I think what we're running, I'll break it down into, I think you had two sections there, and I'll try to break them down shortly, and then perhaps other people can answer your question as well. In terms of the actual, you say that, you know, it's unconscionable that someone would actually pick up a firearm, say at the age of 11, and fire. What I'll say is that I also picked up a firearm around that same age. Again, it was Boy Scouts, so we're somewhat partners in crime there. The challenge that you run into when you're exercising regulatory process over the ownership of firearm, and let's be clear, we're talking about ownership here. The ownership of a handgun is very simply that it is a right. The number of handgun accidents, and training accidents in particular, that have occurred in the United States in the last 15 years has been going down, and we're happy to provide you that information. It's actually a fairly rare and safe, it's fairly rare to have an accident. It's a fairly safe sport. So one of the challenges that you have to consider when we're looking at a regulation which implicitly requires the exercise of a live fire requirement is, what is our basis? You know, will public safety actually be increased? You presumably learn to use a firearm safely. Your son, presumably without advantage of this course, is going to learn to fire safely. And my children, who will be under the age, I assume your son also is under the age of getting a handgun qualification license, he's got to learn from somebody. So historically, the United States of America has done a very good job teaching our youth and teaching ourselves how to use firearms safely. There are no studies whatsoever to suggest, I'm even using the word suggest, that a live fire requirement in Maryland, and we've already heard testimony today that there was no objective analysis done at all. Again, we're emoting. The issue with the emotion is that we are actually regulating a constitutional right, and I would very carefully evaluate the small box the Constitution gives us. I would be very careful to evaluate what things live in and outside of that box. In terms of ranges, I'm glad to see that you are attending a course, and I'm glad to see it's in St. Mary's County. I do know there are some private ranges that do offer. Even within Charles County in Southern Maryland, there's the St. Charles Sportsman Club. I know that every once in a while an instructor there will have the opportunity to offer something. I think what we're talking about specific to ranges has to be expanded to the idea that the entire membership of the state, except for a very small exempt class that is government related, is going to have to do this. We've already heard there's 400,000 people in the Maryland State Database that have a regulated firearm. That does not include the number of people who actually moved into the state, who actually brought a firearm with them, which under the law does not require any type of registration. So what we're looking at over the next few years, and we're looking at the largest demographic groups right now that are adding firearms proficiency to their hobby, self-defense, whatever it might be, are typically urban crowds. And the challenge that we're having right now with this regulation is that there really are no ranges within urban areas, specifically Baltimore, that are going to allow this to occur.